The real impact is hyper-personalization, the delivery of things that are directly meaningful to you as a person, because there is a deeper understanding of what that means. And I think that is a completely game-changing concept. There's so much, there's skepticism everywhere always, of course. Like, that's just how we're wired. But when you look at the ability for a lot of what can transpire with AI being deployed on a very intensely personal device, we're all connected to our phones. And there's something that's very personal and visceral that is delivered to us through that mechanism. The ability for us to receive features that are personal in a new way will be a complete game changer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the DXC stage and welcome Christina Vallery. We're delighted to have the Chief Design Officer at the Cigna Group, a global health company that includes Cigna Healthcare, Evernorth Health Services, and her role is structured to focus on the arrival of transformation and health experience and the active acceleration of innovation in care availability towards the goal of impacting public health and personal health outcomes. Christina, welcome. It's been a delight to see you just a few days ago. Where are you calling from?
I am in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a cloudy, rainy day as per our usual.
Tell us a little bit about your background and help audiences get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, I am a chief design officer, but I have done all of the jobs. I actually started out my career in technology as a technical writer. This was back in the day when designers weren't necessarily on staff. So I started out in technology, writing about how to use software. And I became a designer because I was having all of these conversations with the engineers about how their code wasn't good enough to be able to describe how to use it. So I feel like I've held all the jobs. I spent a lot of my career as an individual contributor, serving as a principal designer. So the foray into leadership was something that I jumped into probably about 15-ish years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And here I am.
And here you are. And what is your kind of experience right now with AI?
I think everyone everywhere is trying to figure things out. From my perspective and from my role, my team right now is embracing AI in two fundamental ways. One, trying to understand how AI will create implications for the experience of the future from a consumer-based perspective, from a user perspective. And the second, which is what I think most people are focusing on right now, how do we use AI to gain efficiencies in our work and our work product? How does it transform the way that we work? Both of those are infinitely fascinating. And I wouldn't say that I am an expert. I know that there are experts in this space, but more what I'm seeing is that there's expertise in these niche areas versus this idea of a general established expertise. So I think we're all kind of learning as we go along. And, much like everyone else, I'm trying to learn as fast as I can and keep up. And that is an impossible task. Things are changing so fast.
Do you feel, with this kind of quick river, it almost feels like a quick river that we're all swimming in. Like, what was that kind of moment you felt for yourself when AI really came about? Was it way before Gen AI for you, or like what sort of history do you see there?
Wow, that's an interesting question. AI and AI enabled capabilities are not new, and they're not new to the conversation. But the thing that has been the most interesting is that now they actually work the right way, that AI has evolved to a state where the functions that folks have imagined for the last 20 years now actually have credibility and efficacy behind them. So that has really transformed everything, and the acceleration at which the models are learning and delivering product that feels natural and is actually accomplishing the goals that are set out to achieve is the difference. And I think that makes it a super interesting conversation in the world of experience, because designers have been able to imagine what AI could do effectively for the entirety of its existence. It just hasn't worked that way. So I think part of the interesting conversation from a design perspective is, well, how do we actually evolve the experience around it? And I do think that there's a lot to unpack here. I think that there is something that's required right now that needs to be further explored or like kind of blown up, is the idea of evolving experiences from the capabilities that are now available. If you look back historically, like the thing that folks really recognize is the idea of a chat bot, right? Like of a bot. And now that bots actually can function appropriately, the idea of what that experience looks like, I think, can take on a new form. And I don't believe that we've invented or imagined what that could be just yet. I think we're still kind of stuck in the patterns that we know really, really well. And there's new territory that we need to get into when we examine how to wrap an experience around this technology and this set of capabilities that previous to date we expected to work but really didn't.
I think that comment about designers having imagined this far in advance is a really interesting thought to kind of sit on. And how would you kind of characterize the current zeitgeist around AI, from the news cycles to how people are talking about it? Any analogies or parallels that you see between our current state society and history?
Well, I'm going to answer this in a personal way, because this is something that has really struck me recently. I mentioned early on that I have a background in writing. I started out as a writer, and this moment feels to me like when we saw the rise of design take hold. So, just to explain that a little bit, I was a technical writer. I was working directly with engineers. And the conversations that I was having with the engineering team were essentially, I think we can improve the software that you're building in this way, and that will make it easier and more understandable for people to use. That was the beginning of the conversation for user experience and user experience design. That's kind of, one of the ways that this craft evolved. And at that moment, when I realized what I was doing was not writing but designing, there was something that clicked in my mind, and it was super important to me because it set the course for my career. I feel that same energy happening now. I feel that we're on at a really incredible place in time where everything is changing and the landscape is changing. And that's giving us this new opportunity to imagine things in a completely different way. And I believe that there will be crafts that evolve out of this moment towards these considerations that we're talking about, right? Like there is a future to be imagined that we have not imagined yet, and new things will come about because of that. So to me, that there's just a lot of energy that feels very specific. It feels like one of those moments in time where things are shifting and turning in a kind of a dramatic way and in this incredibly rapid way, and new things will come about as a result of that. So it's probably a non-specific answer, but there's something about this moment that feels evocative of times of big change. And it feels to me personally the same that it did back then.
What's a one word emotion that you kind of characterize your feeling about this time?
That's a good question. There's something that's buzzing. Like there's like a vibration or something that's happening, it's there's a frenetic energy, and
Mm.
I think that in some ways that kind of energy feels exciting. In some ways that kind of energy feels a little bit scary or daunting. So I think that's it. It's not one word. It's just like there's this buzz happening. There's this energy that's unique, and it can go either way. Like it can bring you to a point where you're feeling like incredibly optimistic about the possibility, because the possibility isn't something that we've thought of before. But then that also, the counterpoint to that is that it can be a little scary at times and feel like we may not know what the
Mhm.
future is, like even less than we ever have before.
Hmm. Frenetic is such a good word here. I haven't heard it used in that way, but I'm just sensing like this incredible amount of energy. And we're like, how do we use it? How do we deal with it? It's like a new kind of entity in our lives right now. And I think there's a question, in this community is what is that role of a designer, the design professional in this age of AI?
I'm trying to figure that out right now. I know that things will radically change. I can imagine a lot of plausible scenarios for the designer. Um, and I'm really trying to figure this out right now. I'm really intrigued by it. Um, my answer right now is that I think that there's an opportunity for not only designers but for every craft to clear away the noise through using AI in a very specific and deliberate way, right? Like there's a lot of talk everywhere in every channel in every industry about how AI presents a threat because it will take something away. But for me, what I look at is AI can give us the ability to reclaim time that's very precious. And I think that, what will be the case for everyone if we use AI in a safe and smart way, we will create more space and time for ourselves to do the things that only humans can do. And I would argue that we have spent a lot of time, I can give you an example for every year over the last 20, 25 years where I have had to change what I'm doing to make a machine work on my behalf, spending human time doing things that machines could easily do but weren't doing. If the machines are doing those things for us, then we have more time and we can really double down on the things that are not only important to us as individuals and humans away from work, but we can focus our time and effort into the crafts that we are putting our souls into. We can actually focus on the things that matter to the thing that we want to practice. So I think that if we use AI in the right way, it will allow us to get more clear on what our contribution is and to derive meaning and joy from that. So from a design perspective, what I translate that into is the ability to practice and elevate art. And I do believe that a lot of design work, as we have gotten the acquisition of tools that make the act of creating things easier and easier, has taken away a lot of the actual original art that used to be a part of the craft. I think we can recapture that. And so there's something that I think could be explored there. So that's one aspect of things. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. It will allow us to reclaim the thing that we think is the most important and the thing that we were drawn to industry to do in the first place. So that's the first thing. But then, there's also the idea that automation could actually take over the work in its entirety. And, that I think is something that could be explored. I think the entire exchange is going to cause us to really come to a point where we have to define what it is that this craft is here to deliver in an environment where automation is not just something that we're striving for, but that is available.
I think there's something very mindful there, which is, there's a general feeling of fear when something is taken away from us. But I think what you're articulating is, what if that thing being taken away is something we don't want to keep? And if we exchange that for something we do want to keep and have more of it, does that leave us in a better place collectively as a human, collective?
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting question when we bring that same method to the job of a designer, a content writer, a user researcher, an operations person. Like, what are tasks that we're just spending so much time repeating and it doesn't bring joy or value, but we got to do it? And, what could be then how we do spend that time, right? So I think that's a really interesting territory for design teams to chart out a little bit more and get even more thoughtful about how do we think as a team about what's our stance on what is automated versus, augmented.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. As we think about this question, we're knowledge workers, we're creative workers. What do you feel of the things we should keep, should remain more human driven, and why?
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think that there are two things that are top of mind for me. First is the act of, this is going to seem, I hope this doesn't seem silly, the act of feeling. As designers, we talk and practice a lot of empathy. It's part of the methodology, right? Like, designers have to seek to understand human and human responses, human behaviors, patterns, responses, feelings, as it relates to the work that they're doing in order to create something that's better, that's desirable. I believe that work will deepen. And I think that there's something very special to explore there. I think the question of how is to be determined. But I think the idea of space and time provides us the ability to go deeper in the places that are the most important for designers to understand and to practice within. And I think that, when I think about my own experience and the people that I work with, probably the number one complaint of any designer or design team is that they don't have enough space and time to do the things that they really want to do, or to do it in the way that they want to do it. And so the question is, what do you do when you do have that time? How does it actually evolve beyond the way that you practice today? So the first aspect is that notion of deep human empathy and understanding. And, if the machines are off doing the things that machines should do, and they do that well, and they do it safely, then we should be doubling down on human relationships. And that becomes something very precious. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is the idea of art. And we talked a little bit about this in, a couple of the things that we were discussing before. But I do think that the idea of creativity, creative thinking, and the product of creativity in this space will be redefined. And I think that the aspect of the intent to be creative and to deliver creative product is something that we should double down on. So in the same way that we would be getting deeper in what it means to actually understand the value of what you can deliver to another person, that empathy aspect, that we need to understand how creativity can be examined as this very human thing that cannot be truly replicated. This is a human thing that we should be spending time on. How does that translate into the work differently? Is there something new that we can imagine? And one of the things that I think is a very interesting prospect as we're looking at AI is the idea of the extension of environment. we've lived within the same kind of digital spheres for a very long period of time, but now we have new concepts of how to deliver experiences in new kinds of environments that we haven't explored before. So I think if we are looking at the expansion of how we can deliver experience and how we can create more meaningful human bonds, human relationships, and the examination of those things and the meaning behind them, that we will be led to invent new things and to deliver that creativity through new mechanisms that didn't exist before. So those are the two things.
Do you find in this kind of age of new creativity with these AI tools, are you leveraging AI as a thought partner often as a creative yourself?
I do, but I don't rely on it as an expert for anything. So I, like there's a lot of dabbling that's happening. And the way that I use it right now is like, let me throw something out there and see what sticks. Like I'm using it almost as like a sounding board in some way, or to unstick myself if I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's kind of an interesting angle. And then like an interesting way to use it. And, for everything that I can see, and like what's happening out there in the world, I think that that's kind of like a really valid way to use it right now. If you are stuck, go see what you can get, and then maybe that will unstick you. So it's been really valuable for me for that, because I have a lot of things. There's a lot of change management happening with me and like with my role. And I get stuck on the regular. So it's helping me like to work through that a little bit faster. It's kind of like providing me that assistance.
Yeah, it's almost like more rapid decision making as a result of being unstuck. And on the topic of decision making, how do you see this era shaping the nature of design leadership in this time? Any new demands on skill sets, mindsets, practices, ways we might not have anticipated?
Yeah. We just spoke about kind of the hypothesis that I have, where it really is, or will call us to examine empathy and relationships between humans, and the impact and meaning of those things, as well as the act of creativity for a designer. And I think that from a leadership perspective, if that hypothesis is to be followed, then that becomes the role of the leader, to explore and examine and highlight those things that matter. So I think for now, it really is about imagining forward and being really experimental around how we can create transformation and imagine a future that we haven't imagined before. We haven't taken the time to imagine, or maybe we couldn't imagine. And then I think when we have a clearer course on how AI will be embraced in a way that's appropriate and safe to use at scale, then it will be to get deeper on those things that we need to focus our time on. And so I do think that we'll take a turn, but the role of leadership now is to experiment and come up with those directions that will lead us towards this new future.
It's almost like dabble as a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of, competencies to stay ahead, do you see any new roles emerging, any roles diminishing? I'm even thinking for yourself as a, relatively newly minted chief design officers, how, you see yourself evolving as we head towards this future.
I'm really interested in evolving the idea of the new spheres of creativity. I do think that for me, the universe of how we deliver experience has like transformed. It has transformed, and it has new permutations that we haven't yet evolved methodologies and frameworks around. So it almost is like we are in a place where we have like all of this uncharted territory, and we have to make sense of it and give a new way of thinking about how to embrace these things in the way that we have traditionally known. And what I'm really examining right now is the idea of the expansion of the spheres that we deliver for. So to me, there's just so much work right now around the idea of letting go of everything that we know and trying to move forward in this incredibly creative way to imagine beyond. And I think that's not like a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, but I do believe that as practitioners, we have been working within the same set of confines and guardrails for a very tangible amount of time, like 20, 25 years. We've been kind of like imagining the same kinds of things over and over again, just at scale. And now we have these new territories, and we just don't have the foundations in place. So it really is about pushing and stretching the idea of the imagination in order to get into this place where we can imagine beyond.
It's almost looking at the ocean and saying what's next, right? And I think, as a designer, we can't talk about this interview without talking about the future of experiences. How might the future customer user experience look or feel like? Let's start with the next 3 years, and then we'll go into the next 10.
I think the next 3 years will be, I think for the consumer, there's a similar journey, right? Like in the world that we live in, we kind of are, we have to be ahead of the consumer. So we're looking at technologies that will impact the consumer, and we're thinking about how to be able to deliver these things directly to the consumer so that they can be experienced on a broad scale. So the journey that I described of experimentation, curiosity, discovery will be what gets brought to the consumer. This will be a time to dabble, a time to see, and a time to imagine forward what your expectations are for how you interact with the things that you are given. So I think that trajectory is like, it's a lot of exploration. It's a lot of maybe a little bit of excitement, maybe a little bit of skepticism. But I think the journey that we're on right now is the journey that the consumer will be on when we start to actually implement new things into that delivery model and bring a lot of the things that we're just starting to imagine into a realistic scenario.
Let's pick just as a fun exercise, let's pick a commonly used, I don't know, let's say our phones. What do you think it's going to do differently, looking forward?
Let me think about this. Our phones. Well, I mean, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to talk about a phone without thinking about the things that I've seen on the big stage with what some of our friends are actually delivering. I think that the real impact is hyper personalization.
Mm-hmm.
The delivery of things that are directly meaningful to you as a person, because there is a deeper understanding of what that means. And I think that is a completely game-changing concept. There's so much, there's skepticism everywhere always, of course. Like, that's just how we're wired. But I think when you see new features and things that are specifically delivered to your phone, there's just this like eye roll moment where you're like, why did this happen? How is this going to help me? But when you look at the ability for a lot of what can transpire with AI being deployed on a very intensely personal device, we're all connected to our phones. And there's something that's very personal and visceral that is delivered to us through that mechanism. The ability for us to receive features that are personal in a new way will be a complete game changer. And that will have implications on not only what others are expecting, like in the competitive environment, like from a technology perspective, the competitive environment is going to change and it will get even more competitive. But the idea of how we receive work and how we receive features and functions take on a new life when they're like just for you. So I think that we are on the precipice of something very transformative there, and some of it I can't imagine right now.
I'm even thinking to your point about personalization, bespoke. It's almost like the arrival of somewhat of couture technology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I know you're a fashion person, so you understand. And, now let's think 10 years, like, what is our lives going to feel and look like by that point if in 1 year we have seen incredible change in even our day-to-day, interactions. So let's look a little at 10 years. Like, what do you kind of see? And this is just a fun exercise to stretch our brains a little bit.
There are two things. One is that I think that the idea of like hyper personalization will transform the way that we interact with each other, and we might become awful because of it. Like, if we expect everything to be completely personalized, like we will have no tolerance when it's not, right? So there's something about how we actually interact with each other and what our expectations are of others because of that receipt of something that's hyper personalized. So that's one thing that I think is interesting. But I also think that we are going to start experiencing things more frequently outside of familiar environments. And I think that spatial environments and the actual the materialization of what AI can conceive of today will start to be imagined in in delivery mechanisms that are outside of those that we know now and are very familiar with. So I think that there's, like AI evolving as spatial environments and spatial experiential devices are becoming more available and easier to procure, like more accessible,
right,
is an important thing to take note of.
Yeah. I think even when I hear the word spatial, I remember when I tried on the Apple Vision Pro, and I know they're evolving that product, but just being immersed at that level of reality is a little like, whoa, like Star Trek, Star Wars, like where are we going? And I think to your point about personalization is I even look at your glasses that you're wearing, like maybe it would just be contact lenses or something that just like changes our field of vision, right? And how does that change our experience? There's Black Mirror, there's a lot of ways it could evolve, but that dimension, I think, as designers is, as the interface gets out of the way, like the physical interface. How does that change human relations?
I think like science fiction, in the same way that we have, as designers, we have imagined like AI for a very long time, like working the way that it's working now, but it didn't. Like sci-fi has had all of these thoughts for a very long time, and it's kind of interesting to like compare what's happening now to a lot of like really well-known science fiction, like pop culture movies, all of that stuff. It's super interesting, but like on the real tip, I think the idea of the extension of environment is an extension of this concept of hyper-personalization, because when you have something that is delivered to you that is intensely yours, and it becomes available in your field of vision that is uniquely yours, that almost you can think of it as almost a natural extension
Mm,
of personalization. It is delivered to you,
mhm, mhm,
and only you can see it and only you can experience it. So it's
mhm.
actually like this kind of dimensional exploration of personalization. It's intensely personal.
I don't know if I'm frightened or excited by that
I know.
idea, hyper personalization.
Yeah, I
Like, it
know.
reminds me of, is it one of those Minority Report where the ads
Yeah,
change based on how you walk and who
yeah,
you are, and
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
the level of advertising being another dimension that we haven't talked about, where personalization. So, I think we're at an interesting time. I think sci-fi's also painted a lot of health futures of like how machines can heal us or increase
yeah.
longevity and even immortality. So proactive, a diagnostic. So there's so many kind of, I think, futures that we're looking at.
Yes.
What sort of movie, book, or story do you feel gives you inspiration on a better future or a future to prevent between humans and machines?
Um, well, I'm not gonna go down the science fiction right route. But I will tell you about a book that I read fairly recently that had a profound impact on me, and that is Jane McGonigal's book, Imaginable. That book kind of changed my perspective on how to think about future facing scenarios and led me down a path
Mm,
where I personally wanted to learn the craft of foresight planning towards the idea of being able to stretch my imagination into more of a future facing perspective. So that book had a profound effect on me. It kind of prompted me to learn foresight planning and to bring it into the work that we do, um, and to put that right alongside of human-centered design, of user-centered design. Like, those 2 practices complement each other really well, and I think that the ideas that are being put forward in, a lot of foresight planning curriculums are very equipped to bring us into that next level of headspace, and it doesn't, like, to me, they don't replace each other, they're complementing one another.
mm,
And I look at, a lot of what's happening now and the kind of the examination of AI as this ability to obtain depth and to extend into new dimensions, and I don't mean that, like, in spatial dimensions, but, like, to get into a dimensional state, where we're looking at angles and different ways of achieving a different kind of depth. And that's what I think the idea of foresight planning delivers to
mm,
the work. It essentially extends the dimensional considerations and kind of like enriches the thing that we were already there to do.
mm. I,
So
I think there's something powerful about and I know you're so passionate about foresight and really looking at the future, because I think there's something interesting about the power of our empathy and humanity, and then connecting that emotion and understanding to these 10-year futures, right? And there are things that in our research settings people can't even articulate yet, right? And
mhm.
so I think there's that kind of innovator kind of mindset that I'm hearing from you. And I think in our kind of deeper conversations for the future, we could go much deeper into foresight and your practices around there. But I think there's a great way to kind of end our interview today. And so, Christina, thank you for sharing so graciously with us today on the DXC stage.